They gave me 48 hours to pack my bags. I was ready to sign the settlement just to make the pain stop. Anita smirked as she slid the eviction notice across the mahogany table. Then the estate executor turned the page. He didn't look at me. He looked right at them. He read one specific sentence regarding the $1.4 billion fortune, and the color drained from their faces. But before I tell you what happened, please do me a quick favor, like, share and subscribe to our channel, to us. Where are you watching us from? Drop your city in the comments. My name is Alexander Fedrick, 67. For 10 years, I lived in the shadow of a woman who could move markets. My wife died 2 weeks ago. Sudden stroke. She left behind a massive empire and 2 estranged daughters, Anita and Vanessa. Both were absolutely certain I was a manipulator who had charmed my way into the money. The truth? I was a caterer. She was the billionaire. I brought nothing to the marriage but a small pension and genuine love. She didn't care. Hours after the funeral, the daughters didn't knock. They barged in while I was still grieving. They didn't offer condolences. Anita just slammed a legal folder on the desk and told me to get out. The world knew Eleanor as a titan of industry. To the business press, she was the Iron Lady of real estate, a woman who could level a city block with a signature and rebuild it in her image. Her net worth was a number so large it felt abstract to me, a string of zeros that meant power to everyone else, but simply meant isolation to her. But I never knew the CEO. I only knew the woman who liked her toast burnt and who hummed off key while watering the hydrangeas in her oversized garden. Our life inside the gates of the estate was shockingly ordinary. While the tabloids speculated about her hostile takeovers and secret mergers, our evenings were spent in the small den off the kitchen, not the cavernous formal dining room. We didn't have a staff of servants waiting on us hand and foot. Eleanor hated the intrusion. She wanted to cook her own pasta on Friday nights. She wanted to wash the dishes while I dried. It was in those quiet moments, amidst the clinking of porcelain and the hum of the refrigerator, that the billions evaporated. We were just 2 people who had found each other late in the game, trying to make the sunset of our lives last as long as possible. I never asked for a cent. When we married, I insisted on a prenuptial agreement that left me with exactly what I came in with: my collection of vintage history books, my reliable sedan, and my small pension. Eleanor hated the idea, telling me she wanted a partnership, not a contract. But I signed it anyway. I wanted to prove to her and to the world that I wasn't after her empire. I didn't understand that by signing that paper, I was giving her daughters the very weapon they would one day use against me. I was content to be her harbor. When she came home with the weight of the empire on her shoulders, my job was to take her coat, pour her tea, and listen. I didn't offer business advice. I offered silence and stability. In return, she gave me a love so fierce it terrified me. She shielded me from the glare of her public life, protecting our privacy as if it were the most valuable asset in her portfolio. Now that she is gone, the silence in this massive house isn't peaceful anymore. It is heavy. The marble floors echo with my footsteps, reminding me that while she left me the keys to a kingdom, without her, it is just a very large, very empty museum. The black suit felt like a second skin I couldn't shed, heavy with the humidity of the gravesite and the weight of the afternoon. The guests had finally dispersed, their murmurs of condolence fading into the hum of departing luxury cars. I retreated to the study, the one room in the house where the scent of Eleanor's perfume still lingered on the leather armchairs. I sat there in the dim light, staring at a framed photograph on the desk, taken just last month in Tuscany, unable to comprehend that the smiling woman next to me was now beneath the earth. I wasn't thinking about the future or the estate. I was just trying to remember the sound of her voice. The silence was shattered not by a knock, but by the heavy oak doors swinging open with a violence that made me jump. Anita walked in first, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor like gunfire. She was still wearing her funeral attire, a designer dress that looked more suited for a cocktail party than a burial, her eyes dry and focused. Vanessa followed a step behind, clutching a thick manila envelope against her chest as if it were a weapon. "I thought you'd be in here," Anita said. Her voice lacked even a tremor of sadness. It was the voice she used for firing subordinates. "Anita, Vanessa," I managed, standing up slowly. My joints ached. I appreciate you coming back. I was just about to make some tea if you—" "Sit down, Alexander," Anita interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. She didn't look at the photo on the desk. She didn't look at the empty chair where her mother used to read. She looked only at me, with a mixture of pity and disdain that chilled me faster than the drafty room. "We aren't here for tea," Vanessa added, stepping forward. She placed the envelope on the desk, right on top of the picture of Eleanor and me. The disrespect was subtle but deliberate. I looked from the envelope to their faces. "What is this?" "It's a reality check," Anita said, crossing her arms. "Mother is gone, Alexander. And thanks to that prenup you were so noble to sign, you have no claim here. We've been patient, letting you play the grieving widower for the cameras today. But the show is over." "I don't understand," I stammered, my mind still foggy with grief. "This is our home." "This was her home," Anita corrected sharply. "And now it's ours. Since you have no legal claim to the property, your residency here is unwanted." Vanessa tapped the envelope. "It's a notice to vacate. We're giving you 48 hours to collect your personal effects, books, clothes, whatever fits in your car. Everything else stays. The furniture, the art, the jewelry, that belongs to the estate. That belongs to us." My breath caught in my throat. 48 hours? She was buried 3 hours ago. "Then you better get packing," Anita said, cold. "Unless you want security to do it for you." My hands trembled as I reached for the envelope, but I didn't open it. I couldn't. The room felt like it was spinning, the air suddenly too thin to breathe. I looked at Vanessa, who had always been the quieter of the two, hoping to find some flicker of the little girl Eleanor had talked about with such affection. But her face was a mask of polished indifference. "You can't do this," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Eleanor wanted me here. We talked about this. She said—" "We know what she said," Anita cut in, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. She walked around the desk, invading my personal space, until I could smell the expensive wine on her breath. "But we also know what you did, Alexander. We know how you isolated her. How you kept us away." "I never kept you away," I protested, a surge of indignation cutting through the shock. "You stopped calling. You stopped visiting unless you needed a wire transfer. She cried on her birthday because neither of you even sent a card." "That's not how it looks on paper," Vanessa said, finally speaking up. She pulled a second document from her bag, sliding it next to the eviction notice. We've been talking to some very interesting people, former staff, nurses, people willing to testify that you controlled her medication, that you confused her, that you took advantage of her declining mental state to rewrite her wishes. That is a lie, I said, my voice rising. A sick, disgusting lie. She was sharp as a tack until the very end. Anita laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. It doesn't matter if it's true, Alexander. It matters what the headlines say. Gold digger husband accused of elder abuse. Billionaire matriarch manipulated on deathbed. Imagine what that will do to you. Imagine your face on every newsstand, your name dragged through the mud until you can't even walk down the street without people spitting on you. I stared at them horrified. These were Eleanor's daughters, flesh of her flesh, and they were threatening to destroy the reputation of the man she loved just to speed up an inheritance they hadn't earned. We're offering you a lifeline, Anita continued, tapping the second document. A settlement. You leave quietly. You sign a non-disclosure agreement. You waive all claims to the estate. In exchange, we'll wire you $200,000 from our personal accounts. Enough to buy a little condo somewhere far away and rot in peace. 200,000? I repeated. It wasn't the amount that insulted me. It was the transactional nature of it. They were buying me off like a nuisance lawsuit. Take it or leave it, Vanessa said, checking her phone as if she had a dinner reservation to make. If you fight us, we release the stories to the press tomorrow morning. We'll tie you up in court for years. You'll spend every penny of your little pension on lawyers, and in the end you'll still lose. We have the resources to bleed you dry, Alexander. Do you? They stood there, flanking me like vultures, confident in their cruelty. They knew I was conflict-averse. They knew I hated the spotlight. They were banking on my cowardice, and looking at their cold, expectant faces, I realized with a sinking heart that they might be right. I didn't have the stomach for war. I just wanted to grieve my wife. The silence that followed their departure was worse than their shouting. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet that seemed to press against the walls of the study. I sat there for a long time, the settlement papers staring up at me like a ransom note. $200,000. It was a lot of money to some. But in this house, it was a rounding error. It was an insult designed to be final. But it wasn't the money that made my stomach churn. It was the threat. Elder abuse. The phrase looped in my mind, ugly and viscous. I imagined the headlines. I imagined the whispers at the grocery store. I imagined Eleanor's friends, the people who had shaken my hand at the service, looking at me with suspicion. Did he force her? Was it all an act? I paced the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me, the part that had loved Eleanor for 10 years, wanted to fight. I wanted to hire the fiercest lawyer in the city and scorch the earth. I wanted to scream the truth until everyone listened. But then I looked at the portrait on the mantel. Eleanor hated conflict. She hated the press. She had spent her entire career carefully curating a public image of strength and dignity. If I fought this, her name would be dragged through the tabloids alongside mine. Her legacy would become a circus. I needed air. I grabbed my car keys and fled the house, the tires crunching loudly on the gravel driveway as I sped away from the estate that no longer felt like home. I didn't have a destination in mind, but the car seemed to know where to go. 20 minutes later, I was walking through the wrought iron gates of the cemetery. The sun was setting, casting long bruised shadows across the manicured grass. The flowers on her grave were still vibrant, a riot of white lilies and pink roses that hadn't yet begun to wilt. The earth was still mounded high, raw and dark against the green turf. I sank to my knees in the dirt, heedless of my suit trousers. "Ellie," I whispered, my voice breaking in the cool evening air. I don't know what to do. I waited, half expecting a sign, a breeze, a bird, anything. But there was only the distant sound of traffic and the rustle of leaves. I touched the cold granite of her headstone, tracing the letters of her name. I thought about what she would say. She would tell me to fight for myself. She would be furious at her daughters, but she wasn't here. And if I engaged in this war, the only winner would be the gossip columnists. "I can't let them turn you into a spectacle," I told the stone. "I can't let them make your life about a dirty legal battle." Tears blurred my vision. Surrendering felt like betraying her, but fighting felt like desecrating her memory. I made my choice right there, amidst the fading light and the smell of damp earth. I would take the hit. I would let them paint me as the villain or the coward, as long as it kept her name clean. I would sign their papers. I would pack my books. I would leave. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my knees. I felt hollowed out, defeated, but strangely resolved. I would give them what they wanted, not because I was weak, but because I loved her enough to lose everything else. The next morning, the house felt like a terminal. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching the spine of a book here, the edge of a vase there, saying a silent goodbye to the life I was about to abandon. I packed 2 suitcases. That was it. 10 years of memories compressed into a few cubic feet of leather and zipper. I left the watch she gave me on our 5th anniversary on the nightstand. I left the silk ties. I left everything that smelled of her money. I called Anita at 9:00 a.m. "I'll sign," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the fight they had expected. "Good choice, Alexander," she replied. She didn't sound relieved. She sounded bored, as if I had simply confirmed a lunch order. "Lawyer's office, noon? Don't be late." I arrived at the Glass and Steel Tower downtown 15 minutes early. The receptionist directed me to a conference room on the 40th floor with a view that cost more than my entire pension. When I walked in, they were already there. Anita and Vanessa sat at the head of the long, polished table, flanking a nervous-looking junior attorney I didn't recognize. The air in the room was electric with their triumph. They weren't just happy. They were practically vibrating. "You're early," Vanessa said, not looking up from her phone. She was scrolling through a real estate app. I caught a glimpse of the screen. A penthouse in Monaco. "Did you bring the keys?" "They're in my pocket," I said, taking the seat at the far end of the table. It felt like sitting at the kids' table at Thanksgiving, miles away from the adults. Anita leaned back in her chair, a predatory smile playing on her lips. "We've already arranged for the locks to be changed at 2 p.m., she said casually. "And we have a team coming in to catalog the inventory tomorrow. We're thinking of auctioning the art collection. Mother had terrible taste in modernism anyway." I winced. Eleanor had loved those paintings. She had spent years curating them, supporting young artists who had no other patrons. To hear them dismissed as terrible taste hurt more than the eviction. "Just give me the papers," I said, my hand outstretched. I wanted this to be over. I wanted to be out of this room, away from their perfume and their cruelty. Impatient, aren't we? Anita slid a thick stack of documents down the table. They hissed against the varnish. Standard boilerplate. You waive all rights. You admit to no wrongdoing. We admit to no wrongdoing. We transfer the funds. You disappear. Simple. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, expensive. I looked at the signature line. Alexander Fedrick. It looked like someone else's name. "What are you going to do with the house?" I asked, hesitating. I don't know why I asked. Maybe I just needed to know that the garden would be tended to. "Bulldoze it, probably," Vanessa said with a shrug. "The land value is insane. We can subdivide the lot into 4 luxury estates. Developers are already emailing me." My grip on the pen tightened until my knuckles turned white. They were going to erase her. Not just her money, but her home, her sanctuary, her art. Every trace of the woman I loved was being liquidated before my eyes. "Sign it, Alexander," Anita commanded, checking her watch. "We have a lunch reservation at Le Bernardin." I lowered the pen to the paper. The ink was black. The end was here. The tip of the pen touched the paper, a tiny black dot marking the beginning of the end. But before I could form the first letter of my name, the heavy conference room doors swung open. "Apologies for the interruption," a deep voice boomed. We all looked up. Standing in the doorway was Marcus Thorne. Marcus wasn't just a lawyer. He was a relic of the old world, a man who had been Eleanor's legal counsel and confidant for 40 years. He was the executor of the estate, a role Anita and Vanessa had been trying to wrestle away from him for months. He walked in with a slow, deliberate gait, carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. "Marcus," Anita snapped, her smile vanishing. "We are in the middle of a private settlement. You weren't invited." "I am the executor of Eleanor's estate," Marcus replied calmly, ignoring her hostility as he walked toward me. "And as such, I am required to be present for any legal proceedings involving the distribution of assets, especially ones conducted with such haste." He stopped beside my chair. I looked up at him, expecting judgment. Instead, I saw a flicker of warmth in his eyes, something I hadn't seen from anyone in days. He placed a hand on my shoulder, firm and reassuring. "Alexander," he said softly, leaning down so only I could hear. "Put the pen down." "I just want it to be over, Marcus," I whispered, my voice trembling. "They're going to destroy her reputation. I can't let them do that." "They can't destroy anything," he murmured back, his voice a low rumble. "She knew, Alexander. She knew they would do this. She knew exactly who they were." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "She was always 3 steps ahead," he whispered, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "Just watch. And for God's sake, don't sign that paper." He straightened up and turned to face the daughters. Anita and Vanessa were exchanging nervous glances. The dynamic in the room was shifting. The air was no longer electric with their triumph. It was thick with sudden tension. "This is harassment," Vanessa declared, standing up. "We have a verbal agreement. Alexander is signing voluntarily." "Is he?" Marcus asked, arching a bushy gray eyebrow. He walked to the head of the table, placing his briefcase down with a heavy thud. "Or is he signing under duress because you threatened to slander him in the press?" "We threaten nothing," Anita lied smoothly, though her face had gone slightly pale. "We are simply facilitating a clean break. Now, if you're done posturing, Marcus, let him sign so we can all move on." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Marcus said. He clicked the latches of his briefcase open. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. You see, there is a specific protocol for the reading of the will, and that protocol requires all potential beneficiaries to be present. That includes Alexander. "He's waiving his beneficiary status," Anita shouted, losing her composure. "That's what the settlement is for." "He hasn't waived it yet," Marcus said, pulling out a single sealed blue envelope. He held it up. "And until he does, I have a legal obligation to read the addendum Eleanor added to her will 6 months ago. An addendum triggered specifically by aggressive legal action." The room went dead silent. Anita sank back into her chair. Vanessa looked at the blue envelope as if it were radioactive. "Sit down, Alexander," Marcus said, his voice returning to its professional volume. "This concerns you? Addendum?" Anita's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like broken glass. "There is no addendum. We saw the draft from last year. It was standard distribution." "You saw the draft Eleanor wanted you to see," Marcus corrected, his tone cool and unbothered. He placed the blue envelope in the center of the table. "This was filed separately, sealed, to be opened only in the event of a dispute regarding Alexander's residency." "This is ridiculous," Vanessa spat, slamming her hand on the table. "You're stalling, Marcus. You're just trying to protect your friend." "Mother was medicated for the last 6 months. Any changes she made are invalid due to incompetence." "Actually," Marcus said, pulling a second document from his briefcase, "I have a signed affidavit from her primary physician dated the same day as this addendum, certifying she was of sound mind and body. Would you like to challenge that in court? Because unlike your threats against Alexander, this will hold up." The sisters exchanged a look of pure venom. They were used to bullying people who couldn't fight back. Waiters, assistants, me. They weren't used to someone who knew the rules better than they did. "Fine," Anita hissed, crossing her arms. "Read it. Let's get this over with. It probably just leaves him the car or some sentimental junk. He can have it. Just sign the papers, Alexander, and you can take whatever trinket she left you." She looked at me with such disdain, treating me like a servant who had overstayed his welcome. "Go on." She gestured at Marcus with a flick of her wrist. "Read the little love note." Marcus didn't rush. He picked up a silver letter opener from the table. He sliced the top of the blue envelope with surgical precision. He pulled out a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. He put on his reading glasses. "This is the last will and testament addendum of Alexander Fedrick," Marcus began, "dated August 14th of this year." Vanessa rolled her eyes. Anita checked her phone again, typing a furious text message. They were so arrogant. They were so certain that nothing in that room could touch them. "Article 4, Section B," Marcus read, "regarding the distribution of the estate, valued at approximately $1.4 billion. At the mention of the number, both sisters straightened up. The boredom vanished. This was the only language they spoke. "My daughters, Anita and Vanessa, have been provided for throughout their lives," Marcus read. "I have given them education, capital, and opportunity. However, I have also watched them treat my husband, Alexander, with consistent disrespect." Anita scoffed loud enough to interrupt him. "Oh, please, she's lecturing us from the grave. Spare me the morality play." Marcus looked over his glasses at her. "I would advise you to listen, Anita, closely." He looked back at the paper. Therefore, I have inserted a safe harbor clause into this trust. This clause is absolute. What safe harbor? Vanessa asked, her voice tight. What does that mean? Marcus took a breath. He looked at me, then at them. It means, he said, that the distribution of the assets is conditional. Conditional on what? Anita demanded. On your behavior, Marcus said, specifically your behavior in the 30 days following her death. Conditional on our behavior? Anita laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. What is this, kindergarten? We're grown women, Marcus. We don't get gold stars for being nice. No, Marcus agreed, his voice steely. You don't, but you do get penalties for being cruel. He smoothed the paper flat on the table. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. My heart was pounding in my throat. I didn't know what was coming, but looking at Marcus's face, I knew it was the hammer blow. The clause reads as follows, Marcus intoned. I know my daughters, I know their greed, and I know their jealousy. I fear that upon my death they will attempt to displace the man who brought me the only peace I have ever known. Anita's face flushed a deep, angry red. This is insulting. I'm contesting this. Let him finish, Vanessa hissed, grabbing her sister's arm. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the paper. She was smarter than Anita. She sensed the trap closing. Marcus continued, his voice echoing in the boardroom. Therefore, should any beneficiary attempt to remove, evict, or coerce my husband, Alexander Fedrick, from our marital home within 1 year of my passing. He paused. He looked up, his eyes locked onto the eviction notice still sitting on the table, the one Anita had so proudly slapped down just moments before. Then that beneficiary shall immediately forfeit their entire share of the estate. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed, but not yet detonated. Anita's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Vanessa's grip on her sister's arm tightened until her nails turned white. In such an event, Marcus read the final sentence. The forfeited shares shall be transferred in their entirety to the sole remaining beneficiary, Alexander Fedrick. It took a second for the math to hit them. $1.4 billion. Gone. Evaporated by their own greed. No, Anita whispered. No, that's not legal. You can't do that. It is perfectly legal, Marcus said, closing the folder. It is a standard terror clause, modified for this specific condition. You triggered it the moment you served Alexander with that eviction notice. We have the security footage from the study. We have the audio of your threats. The condition has been met. You set us up, Vanessa screamed, jumping to her feet. You knew. You let us do it. I didn't let you do anything, Marcus said calmly. I simply watched you be exactly who your mother knew you were. You had a choice. You could have mourned with him. You could have been kind. Instead, you gave him 48 hours to leave. So, in accordance with your mother's wishes, I am now giving you the same courtesy. He turned to the security guard standing by the door. Please escort these two ladies from the building. They have no business with the estate. Alexander! Anita turned to me, desperation replacing the arrogance in her eyes. Alexander, tell him. We were emotional. We didn't mean it. We can work this out. I looked at them. I looked at the women who had threatened to destroy my life an hour ago. I looked at the eviction notice. I slowly picked it up, folded it in half, and slid it toward them. I think you should go, I said softly. I watched them leave, not with triumph, but with a deep, aching sadness. Anita was still shouting as the security guards guided her into the hallway, her threats of lawsuits echoing off the glass walls until the elevator doors finally slid shut. Vanessa didn't say a word. She just stared at the floor, the realization of what she had lost crushing her posture. They walked out of the boardroom and out of the legacy they had felt so entitled to. When the room was finally quiet, Marcus exhaled a long breath and sank into a chair. He looked older suddenly, the adrenaline fading. "I'm sorry it had to happen that way, Alexander. Eleanor hoped, well, she hoped she was wrong about them. She wrote that clause praying it would never be read." "She knew," I said, staring at the empty chairs. "She always knew." "So," Marcus said, tapping the blue folder, "congratulations are in order, I suppose. You are now the sole trustee of the Fedrick estate. The properties, the portfolio, the controlling interest in the company, it's all yours." I looked out the window at the sprawling city below. Somewhere down there, in the maze of steel and concrete, people were struggling to pay rent, to buy medicine, to keep their families together. And here I was, an accidental billionaire, holding the keys to an empire I never wanted. "I don't want it, Marcus," I said, turning back to him. "I don't want the yachts or the penthouses. I don't want to spend the rest of my life managing hedge funds." "I figured as much," Marcus smiled. "So, what do you want to do?" I thought about Eleanor. I thought about the nights we spent talking about the things that actually mattered to her, the literacy programs she secretly funded, the hospitals she wished she could build, the artists she wanted to support. She had spent her life accumulating wealth because she was good at it, but her heart was always in what that wealth could do. "I want to protect it," I said, "not from the market, but from the greed that destroyed this family. I want to turn the entire estate into a charitable trust. Every cent. The Eleanor Fedrick Foundation." Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's ambitious." "The daughters will fight you." "Let them fight," I said, feeling a new strength settle in my chest. "They can fight a team of the best lawyers $1.4 billion can buy. But I'm not keeping the money for myself. I'm going to use it to build the things Eleanor cared about. Housing, education, art. I'm going to make sure her name is remembered for her generosity, not for the scandal her daughters tried to create." Marcus nodded slowly, a look of profound respect on his face. "She chose well, Alexander. She really did." I left the lawyer's office an hour later. I didn't take a limousine. I took a cab. I went back to the house, but it felt different now. The emptiness was still there, but the fear was gone. I wasn't a trespasser anymore. I was the guardian. I walked into the study and sat in her chair. I picked up the picture of us in Tuscany. "It's okay, Ellie," I whispered to the frame. "They can't hurt you now. I've got it from here." Eleanor knew that difference. She knew that blood doesn't make a family, love does. She made sure that even in death, she could protect the person who truly cared for her heart, not her bank account. So if you're watching this and you're planning your own legacy, take a lesson from the Iron Lady. Your will is more than just a legal document. It's the final conversation you'll ever have with the people you leave behind. Make sure it speaks the truth. If this story hit home for you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen greed tear a family apart? Tell me your story in the comments. And remember, true victory isn't about crushing your enemies. It's about protecting what matters and honoring the people who truly loved you. Until next time, this is Alexander Fedrick reminding you that the richest person in the room isn't the one with the most money. It's the one with the clearest conscience.